Hi guys, my name is James Raphael and I'm a warrior addict, Grand Warrior. And in this short 15-minute video we're going to look at mastering a pose. That pose today is downward facing dog. It might seem unusual to take a lot of time to look at such a staple pose as down dog, but actually it's a really complex pose. There's a lot going on in it. And particularly for guys, it throws out two problem areas. One, the hamstrings, and the other, the shoulders. But what's interesting about downward dog is when you really refine it, whether you're new or more experienced in yoga, the refinement of down dog, there's a lot of movements and alignment cues which you take into other postures, which you take into things like arm balances, and also other standing postures and other seated postures. So there's a lot that you can learn from this pose. So I'm going to break down down dog in a simple way and then go into a little bit more detail of how you can find the best shape for your body. For this video, you're not going to need anything other than ideally a mat to practice on, or just something you can root your hands and your feet down onto. So let's get going. To begin with, we're going to come into child's pose first. So to set up a good child's pose, find the hands and knees, and the hands come below shoulders, knees below hips. Touch your big toes together and start to sit back towards the heels. And even if you don't sit all the way back to touch the heels, slowly work back in that direction. Now, you might be able to release your forehead down to the mat, but if that doesn't work for you, you can stack your fists and rest your forehead on the fists if you're a little bit higher up. Take a few deep breaths into the back of the body here. Your breath in fills the back of the body, and you might feel your spine almost lengthening. So here the spine is long and the breath is deep, which is exactly how it will be for down dog. From here now, come back to the hands and knees. And this time, you tuck your toes. We're going to slide the right foot back and press the heel away. So let's open up through the back of the leg, through the right hamstring set. Whilst you're doing this, have a look at your hands. Often the fingers are together or the knuckles are raised like this. Could you work to spread the fingers and root all of the fingers down? Particularly this L shape that you have between the thumb and the first finger. Really root that down into the mat. And let's switch the legs. So it's a similar thing again as to what's happening down dog. The legs are lengthening, and you're finding that stretch at the back of the hamstring, the calf, back of the knee. At the same time that the hands are rooting and the fingers are spreading. If you notice after a while the first finger starts to lift up like this, re-root the thumb or the finger down. And coming back to centre. So for an ideal down dog, start by positioning your hands shoulder width apart on the hands and knees. The fingers are spread, and to begin with, try having your middle finger or your index finger facing straight forwards in line with the edge of the mat. Tuck your toes, and before you go anywhere else, another little thing. For a moment, bend your elbows slightly, see where they go. Most of the time they come out to the sides. So you might notice if you bend your elbows they come out to the sides. If I show you this way, similar thing, they come out this way, kind of like a press up. Down dog is not this alignment. In down dog, if I was to bend my elbows would go down towards the mat. So you might try that. In order to do that, rather than bending the elbows and allowing the arms to come out to the side, bend the elbows and send the elbows down towards the mat. You'll notice it's much more active in the arms, and it's like your triceps are wrapping in towards the middle of the mat. Everything's hugging into the midline. And these are down dog arms. So let's try that again. Fingers are spread, thumb and first finger are rooting, index finger or the middle finger are facing forwards. And now as you bend the elbows just a little bit, test it out, elbows come down towards the mat, but then re-lengthen them. And you might notice here that because you've wrapped your triceps inwards, the crease of the elbow no longer faces the middle of the mat. The crease of the elbow actually starts to face forwards, and you see that there's a wrapping. So I'm not here, I'm here with the arms straight, elbows wrapping forwards. Okay, let's come up. From here, the toes tuck, and lift the hips. And as you come into the first down dog, have a little walkabout, move the feet, maybe bend one knee then the other. Getting used to the general shape of the pose without trying to perfect it. And feeling being upside down, being in the hands and the feet. Now start to stabilise your down dog. Your feet, if you came up from hands and knees, are probably a little bit too close to your hands. So you might want to step the feet back maybe 4 or 5 inches so you have a bit more length. The way I practice down dog, the feet are about hip distance apart. So they're not out really wide, they're not as wide as the hands, at shoulder width apart, but also they're not right together. The feet are about hip distance apart. Usually that means you could imagine a third foot in the middle. So you have one foot, the space a foot wide, and then another foot. You'll hear lots of different ways to come into down dog, but this makes sense to me because the arm bones can deepen down into the sockets of the shoulders, and the thigh bones, the heads of the femurs, can softly come into the pelvis when they're hip distance apart. Keep the knees a little bit bent. Just another couple breaths. If you're wrapping the arms in, they're probably starting to work already. And then let's come down. Take a moment, give the wrists a little bit of a circle, and shake them out. So it's true that down dog can become a restorative pose or a pose to rest in, especially in the middle of a flowing vinyasa class. But actually, when down dog starts to be worked with precision and real attention, it becomes quite a strong pose. And you can play with down dog being this strong, strengthening position or being a little bit lighter, which we're going to look at now. So we're going to come back in and again refine a little bit more. So, hands shoulder width apart, lift the knees, and again step the feet ever so slightly back, feet hip distance apart. Now, I'm going to bend my knees slightly. That frees up my lower back so I can send my hips up. Stick your tailbone and the sitting bones up towards the ceiling so you begin to lengthen the spine. Double check if you were to bend your elbows, they don't go out to the sides, they wrap in slightly and they would go down if you bend them, but keep the arms long. We're going to build the pose from the ground up now. Your hands and feet are in place. Now, if your shoulders are really tight and this feels really difficult to be here, you're going to turn your hands out at about 45 degrees, so almost as though your thumb was coming straight up the mat in line with the edge of the mat. So you've created a bit more space in the shoulders. That could give you some more room to slowly take your chest between the arms towards the knees. In either hand position, keep that wrapping of the triceps in, and the shoulders are broad. So rather than pinching in at the shoulders and compressing the neck like this, I'm going to send my shoulder blades wide and wrap in slightly. If I show you that from the front, you can come down for a moment, take a rest. It's a difference from being in a position like this, where the shoulders start to wing off the upper back and the elbows come out, to wrapping the triceps in, creating space alongside the ears, and the shoulder blades going wide across the upper back, so you get really broad. So, coming back up, hands and feet root, shoulder blades are going wide, strong arms. From here, with the legs, see if you could spread all your toes. Then imagine the inner thigh is going backwards. It's as though someone was drawing the inner thigh back behind you, and that means your legs start to wrap in slightly and the thighs come back between the legs. And it's a subtle action, but it will start to really strengthen the legs and bring a little space into the pelvis. Now, if your spine is long and you feel you have lots of space, maybe now you begin to straighten the legs. But often what will happen is you'll straighten the legs and the back will do this because the hamstrings are tight. So for now, it could be helpful to focus on opening the shoulders, lengthening the spine by keeping the knees a bit bent. Take another couple breaths here. Keep all fingers rooting. And then slowly come down. Give the hands a little circle and the wrists a little shake. So we're going to keep building on this down dog. Eventually your down dog starts to look like an upside down V shape. Some styles of yoga prefer a slightly longer down dog, things like Iyengar, and others prefer a slightly shorter down dog, things like Ashtanga, because the purpose of the pose is different in those different practices, and we're moving in different ways from that pose. So the way that I'm teaching it is a general down dog that's probably suitable for most open yoga classes you go to, and most vinyasa yoga classes that you go to. So we're going to come back into it again and continue to look into the detail. This is where it starts to get a little bit more advanced, a bit more complicated, because there's some other interesting things going on. Some of this is subtle, so listen carefully. Find your down dog once more. Let's just have a check-in. Hands shoulder width apart, fingers spread. Feet hip distance apart, toes spread. Triceps are wrapping in, shoulder blades broad across the upper back. And your head now is gently floating between the arms. If that requires you to strain your neck, don't worry, bring the head forward slightly. Keep the neck free and without strain. The knees are slightly bent to begin. The hips lift up and the chest reaches towards the knees. The breath is deep and full through the nose. Now refine. Imagine your inner thighs are wrapping back as your tailbone goes up. You might start to straighten the legs. And rather than thinking about taking the heels down to the floor, imagine you could take the heel towards the wall behind you, like you could lengthen the sole of the foot and reach the heel further away. That'll actually help open through the back of the knee and the calf. And then eventually maybe the heels descend a little bit. But again, noticing if your lower back starts to round because you do that, you're actually losing a lot of the pose. Keep the knees a little bit bent, long spine. Eventually the heels will come down, then the spine will stay long. Maintain a deep breath. Then as you inhale, imagine the spine getting longer. As you exhale, feel the belly button drawing in towards the spine gently. Inhale, fill the upper back and the chest. Exhale, belly button comes in. This is the beginning of an Ujjayi breath if you're familiar with that breath. 2 more. Really rooting into the hands and feet, lifting through the hips. And exhaling, coming down. So if you've been joining me all the way through, you're probably realising that down dog can end up being quite a bit of work, both physically because you're on the hands and you're working the arms, but also mentally, because there's a lot of concentration going on. If you're spreading the fingers and the toes, you're broadening the shoulders, wrapping the triceps in, relaxing the neck, if you're wrapping the inner thighs back and inwards, if you're lengthening the spine, lifting the hips, extending the legs, there's a lot going on. And Down Dog isn't broken down that much, but it's really worth workshopping in this way, along with this video, to keep coming back and refining, because many of these movements will take you into other poses which maybe seem more exotic or more exciting, but actually a lot of their basis is in Down Dog. I'm going to briefly explain what I mean by that. We'll do one more and then we'll wrap up. So in Down Dog, let's take this action of the arms wrapping in. So my hands are shoulder width apart, and the triceps are coming in, the elbows slightly forwards. So we've done a bit of that. Now this action is the same action you'll find in a lot of poses where the arms come overhead. So if you're in Tadasana, mountain pose, and the arms come overhead, if you were to bend the elbows, ideally they're not going sideways, because the shoulder isn't in as much external rotation as if the palms were facing inwards and the triceps were wrapping in slightly. When you do that, you might notice the upper back broadens as well, and the scapula, the shoulder blade, begins to find real firmness onto the upper back. So rather than being here, which is a little bit less stable, hands face in, triceps wrap in, you'll notice my shoulder blades go broader. So from being here to here, it's that same action in your Down Dog. So you take that action into many standing poses where the arms are overhead. You also take it into some of the arm balances as well. So for instance, if I was coming into flying pigeon, if I bring my hands down and I prepare for the pose, if my elbows are going out to the sides, I'm not going to have any support. My elbows have to wrap in, and as my elbows wrap in, same as Down Dog arms, when I reach forward, that gives me the lift to bring the back leg up for that arm balance. So it's a really useful key alignment point to keep coming back to, because it works in many poses. And also, last thing, the thighs wrapping inwards. In Down Dog, as I roll my inner thighs back towards the wall behind me, I begin to strengthen the legs, and that helps me lengthen my spine. It actually helps broaden the sacrum so that my pelvis has more space to tilt forwards, so my tailbone can come up and back. Now this action is the same action that's happening in a lot of forward folds. So in your seated forward folds, like Paschimottanasana for instance, forward fold with both legs straight, you're similarly wrapping the inner thighs down towards the mat, which helps to broaden across the back of the pelvis and helps with that tilt forwards. So in your forward fold, if the legs are starting to splay out, your pelvis might roll back, and fair enough, you can fold, but your spine may be more rounded. If you're working to wrap the thighs down, draw the tailbone out and back, pelvis begins to tilt, and from that action of the thighs wrapping down, you find that length to come into the forward fold, and you have much more length in your back because your pelvis comes into a more optimal position. So, that's wrapping up Down Dog. Let's do one last one, and then we'll finish. So, breaking it all down, hands and knees. Spread the fingers wide, root the thumb and the first finger down. Wrap your triceps in, tuck the toes. Lift the hips, wiggle your feet back a little bit. Feet hip distance apart. As the triceps wrap in, the shoulder blades go broad. The neck is free. Spine is long as the sitting bones rise, chest towards the knees. Eventually, thighs wrap inwards, and maybe even you begin to straighten the legs a little bit, finding downward facing dog.
Take a few breaths here. Feel those long lines in the body, from the fingertips to the tailbone, and from the tailbone to the heels. Breath fills the back of the body as well as the side of the ribs. As you exhale, the belly button draws in softly. Whenever you're ready, slowly coming out.
So, I hope you can see that down dog is a really complex pose. There's loads going on, but also it's a really simple seeming pose that has hidden depth. And when you start to really work into that hidden depth and start to use those smaller, more subtle alignment cues, you're actually strengthening the rest of your practice. Down dog is an amazing pose. It's multifaceted and really helps build strength and openness throughout the body. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.